sharing my screen there as well. But 1 second, I just lost myself here. Okay, that looks helpful. So just to confirm, you can see my screen and you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, thanks to Marshall and to Paul for inviting me to this event here. It's a pleasure to present to everyone here. And I see you at a very familiar venue to us, the 4 Point Sheraton. We used to hold our annual convocation there in London every year up till a few years ago before the pandemic. And Conservatory Canada, first of all, I'm going to talk about our digital transformation, not only what Invorg has done for us, but a bunch of other things that we've undertaken since about 2007 over the last 16 years or so. So first of all, what is Conservatory Canada? In short, our aim is to foster musical talent potential. Most of our clients or constituents, I could say, are young people, but we also service anyone up to any age for that matter, and usually music student learners. We offer accredited music examinations across Canada and the world, in fact, and that's part of our digital transformation over the past few years as well that I'll speak to. And our constituents, as I said, are mainly students, their teachers, and a board of examiners. And so what we do in providing exams across the country is students learn at a certain level with private studio teachers that are affiliated with Conservatory Canada. And then we administer exams at specific times of the year or on a flex basis, another sort of transformation that we've done, where students can get accredited levels and certificates for these levels to accredit them for taking music exams. We are a registered charity, and those of you may be familiar with our main competitor, the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto. We're sort of the only viable progressive alternative that offers a national reach across Canada that uses a similar type of system to accredit these music exams. We have a 132-year history with the roots going back to 1891 in London, Ontario. That's where our head office still is located. I work remotely from Thunder Bay, quite a ways away, but still up in northwestern Ontario. And again, part of the digital transformation is allowing me to run the organization remotely entirely for the past 8.5 years. So that's a little bit about what we are and what we do. We foster musical talent and potential through an accredited system of learning, evaluation, and recognition for student learners across the country. Here's just a quick look or a map that sort of gives you an idea of where we have centers. This is a little bit outdated. We have a few more centers now with our online capabilities. We have online centers right across the country in every city. In fact, when I put this together a few years ago, some of these weren't online yet, but of course, during the pandemic, everything went 100% online, and that forced us to move a little bit quicker. But we had already laid the foundation for that transformation as early as 2007. And I'll speak about the history of that first, just to give you an idea of where we've come from and where we're going, and how Invorg has helped us with this latest step over the past 3 years. So prior to 2007, we were administering exams. We have examiners traveling across the country, and everything was done on pencil and paper, basically, sent back through the mail, the snail mail, people standing in our office at a scanner, which actually took place right up until about a year ago. And using originally an old Access database in the middle 2000s or around the turn of the century there. And then in 2007, with the help of Echidna, Digital Echidna, which also is located in London, Ontario, they helped create our first digital app that was used as our sort of primitive CRM. It worked very well for us. It actually still continues to work rather well for us, but it had some rather serious limitations. It was very expensive to create, and it became incredibly expensive to maintain over time. And then starting in 2017, we migrated that old app to Invorg's control because they were going to help us do it perhaps a lot more cheaply and bring us a little more up to date in terms of how that app worked. And so we really benefited greatly from that. We were able to keep this app going until we were able to find a way to replace it because it was starting to age and get a little bit too costly. And in 2019, we worked on the sort of beginnings of the architecture of a new system, and Invorg recommended Microsoft Dynamics as the CRM base for our database. Our database is quite complicated, and I've recently, through this process as we launched the new app back last September, just realize how complicated it really is when you're housing academic records. We have many flexible options for our users that have all sorts of exceptions along the way. So it's a bit of a coder's nightmare, I've learned, which is partly why the old app was so difficult to maintain. But I really commend Invorg for getting us through this process and working out the bugs and understanding how complex of a web it actually is. And it seems so simple, but really it wasn't. In terms of parallel transformations, there were some other things in our history along the way that sort of laid the footing for how we operate. But beginning in 2007, we started to hold online exams. Instead of examiners traveling out across the country, we felt that we needed to do something to offer students more flexibility in terms of when they were taking their exams so that they wouldn't have to be at specific times of the year. And we wanted to experiment and try and harness the internet's power because, by 2007, internet had been in people's homes for 10 years plus now. And things were working well enough, we thought, that we could harness that power to see if we could get inside teacher studios with these exams. And so we found an American partner, Time Warp Technologies, I'll refer to them a little bit throughout the presentation, that had developed a MIDI software app that allowed two digital pianos to effectively share sounds so that whatever a student was playing, an examiner could hear remotely coming out of their local keyboard as if the student was sitting right there, and vice versa. And to this day, it's a system that we still use, and it's unlike anything else in the world for music conservatories that conduct these exams. We still are the only, from what I can tell, the only music conservatory in the world, even post-pandemic, that offers full repertoire and skill-based exams using this kind of system of sharing sounds, so that the cost of installing a teacher studio or even a student in their own home to do this is now down to only $39 US to obtain the software. Compare that to what existed before that would be, maybe nowadays a $50,000 instrument, a Yamaha disc clavier, on both sides of the connection to effectively communicate sounds. That works very well, but at over $100,000 is just not something anyone can really get into. At around the same time in 2007, we began hearing what we trademarked our contemporary idioms exams. Up until this point, there was a 100-year history of students playing classical music on these exams. We kind of blew that all open by allowing students to relate to music in a different way. And that sort of went hand in hand with the MIDI technology and the distance remote online exams, in that most of our students that took this up early on were doing these contemporary idioms exams. We had effectively reached a new market just by simply harnessing the internet's power and finding a cheap software to use that worked very well. Starting in 2016, for about a period of 5 years, we made wholesale revisions to our exam syllabi to compete a little bit more firmly and to modernize ourselves. And that's kind of, again, gone hand in hand with the digital transformations. And then in 2022, launching something we call our digital badge assessments that have students submit pre-recorded videos, something that came out through the pandemic. We couldn't always harness a really good, clear connection with students in their homes through the pandemic. And so pre-recording videos on the student side and then submitting them to the teacher for some kind of evaluation or to be the cornerstone of a typical piano or voice lesson, let's say, became sort of the standard for a little while to really hear what was going on in students' homes. One thing through the pandemic, we were really able to hit the ground running. Within a few days of everyone being locked down in March of 2020, I was able to get online through Zoom webinar and reach out to our email list. And I had well over 100 teachers on that first webinar. We held a series of them to get them up to speed with, here's how you can teach online. Here's how you can work with your students still. And of all the students' activities, it were the piano lessons and voice lessons and other instrumental lessons that actually kept those families going for a good couple of years when everything else was shut down. And so suddenly our studio teachers were just an ad hoc group of people who barely connect. We were able to connect them together on the internet. We were able to get them teaching. They were still earning money, but most importantly, we were still able to foster that musical talent and potential. The launch of our digital badge assessments kind of grew out of that, and so did a few other things here that have grown over the last few years. We're at the point now where just before the pandemic, about 1/4 or 25% of our business were online exams. And post-pandemic now, of course, it's been 100% over the last couple of years, and we were able to keep these exams going, mostly using Zoom and our MIDI technology for those that didn't have it. But I think post-pandemic, we're looking at least 60, if not 75% of our students are going to continue with online exams rather than in person, which poses all sorts of scale problems for us, but we're excited to work through those. So back to our most recent development in terms of digital transformation, the reasons for our recent CRM upgrade, for those that aren't sure, Constituent Resource Management System is CRM. And this was using Microsoft Dynamics. Our old app was a hard-coded app. I'm trying to remember, I believe it was in Drupal. I can't be sure on that though, but it was based on a MySQL database. And so upgrading to Microsoft Dynamics, a totally different type of system, but it was going to give us all sorts of advantages. The old app was too expensive to maintain. If we wanted to upload a set of resources for the teacher, it would cost us in the thousands of dollars just to have the most simple thing coded into the old framework. The old app used outdated security protocols, so it was, it would have been very easy to breach that. We're lucky we never had a security-based attack, but it was certainly getting close to that, I think. The old app was impossible to update internally within our own office. We always had to rely on Inborg or whoever our ITC provider was to go in and look at the coding and change things and recommend what might be done. It was sort of the analogy we were used. It was like just putting bubble gum on something really complicated to try and keep the boat from leaking. Lack of expansion capabilities. Every time we wanted to expand or add another piece to that app, it was going to cost thousands of dollars, which we couldn't afford. And so we delayed many things that we wanted to add to it for several years until we could potentially build out the new app. It was also time to redesign and enhance upgrade capabilities in some of the things that I've mentioned. And we've been able to accomplish that now within the new CRM. So in terms of results, we now have the ability to perform maintenance updates internally. It's something that right out of the hop when we launched in September, I was able to get in there and with the help of the talented Inborg staff, was able to figure out how to do some of these things quite quickly that we hadn't been able to previously do. The learning curve is pretty steep, but we chose a less busy time of year for us to do that. And now we're just about to ramp in this next week here to a very busy time. I feel like we're hitting the ground running and we're sort of at speed with the whole thing and how it works. We have the ability to learn and perform back-end updates, which is something, without the coding. Typically, you have to go into the back end and figure out through the code what to do. This Microsoft Dynamics takes care of all of that. And so that's really great because, again, it's going to save us costs. It's going to save us time. Sometimes we have the intuitive ability to know exactly what the update needs to be. We no longer have to communicate that to the ITC provider and have them figure it out and lose lots of time going back and forth, sometimes hours, just to figure out what the client must need. And so this, we're able to circumvent that now. It's just more of a training thing. How do we make some of these backend updates? How does the backend work? It's a little bit complicated, but not near what it used to be. We have the ability to collect more information on our constituents now, our students, our teachers, our examiners. We're able to interface with donors in a different way. We have the ability to run more custom reports on data. We had all of this hard-coded in the past, but now we just have that much more capability using Microsoft Power BI. An added digital examiner portal. We finally get out of, even in the old app, we still had pencil and paper examiners filling out exam report forms. Nowadays, we have this examiner portal where we can enter marks digitally. It saves us a lot of time. We can type into the form, which makes things a little quicker and easier for students to read. Just overall, a much more enhanced experience for the users. We can turn these results around very quickly to students so they don't have to wait days and weeks for their results. And then also adding a new digital badge assessment piece to this whole thing, which was really key. We couldn't do it in the old app, and as we had launched it, we had sort of an ad hoc system that was very labor intensive to get that to work. And of course, the added level of security is really great in this new app now. So we're still working with it now to get it to be optimized. It's been amazing to see the transformation, and the biggest, I think, problem with it was finding the cost. It's very expensive. Inborg, has gone way above and beyond in terms of the hours they put into this. And we realized that they've given us a really good deal. Their goal right from the outset, they were very clear. They wanted to uplift us. They wanted to uplift not-for-profits. That's what they're in the business for. And they certainly have done that. We have large endowed funds from fundraising efforts that took place 40, 50 years ago. And we were able to leverage a lot of the interest that had been held back for a rainy day to afford the app. And that's how we were able to do it. We had tried to go down the road as a not-for-profit to look at government funding for digital enhancements. And we just met up all sorts of closed doors where there was absolutely nothing it seems we could have done at either the provincial or the federal government level. And other organizations too, we had reached out to, we weren't able to come up with anything. And so we feel very lucky that we were able to even afford this. And in terms of our final costs in the end to maintain, I would say right now on a yearly basis, they're about 1/3 of what they were when we had first created the old app back in 2007. A lot of people like to think that, or we've been told by other companies that you really should budget the value of 1 to 1.5 employees to run your digital interfaces. And we're really grateful for Invorg again, because they've got us down to 1/3 of an employee's salary in terms of what it costs to run this app, which is saving us a ton of money. Otherwise, there's just no way we'd be able to do. We would never get off the pencil and paper without this kind of approach. Other digital enhancements that we've used over the years, or that we've had to, lean on a little more heavily lately, especially since the pandemic, MailChimp using email management integration, using Zoom webinar. I actually am able to host a webinar with teachers across the country, and we do get participants from around the world on those every Friday at noon Eastern. A really great way to integrate with and sort of develop a connection with those people. So, the internet we've been able to do, and the Zoom webinar fees are well worth it for us, even a small organization. We've developed partnerships with Time Warp Technologies to use the Internet MIDI app that I spoke of earlier, and also something called SuperScore, which is an app that houses all of our repertoire on the iPad and allows students to play along with and use the iPad as a sort of a coach, a practice coach, so that when they get to their weekly lessons with their teachers, they'll be really on the ball with their rhythm and things like that. We've had the benefit of experiencing something called Musicology, an app developed by a Toronto piano teacher. Recently, the app's become unsupported, unfortunately, but I know she had spent well over $500,000 developing the app, and it was better than Zoom for music lessons for sure. The audio quality was so good. The conversation back and forth was incredibly natural, and it's something we had started to lean on quite heavily until a little bit of a boom or bust there, I'm afraid, in terms of the technology. A really great piece, but unfortunately, it looks like it's all going to waste when you can't support an app at that level. So it was a great lesson for us to watch and learn what can actually happen when you get in over your head, perhaps. Recently, I started simulcasting the webinars on a YouTube channel that we have called CCTV, or Conservatory Canada TV. This is what I call my Conservatory Canada TV studio, where I broadcast from. And website updates. We've made a lot of website updates over the past year. Those things sort of parallel and complement the other digital enhancements. And so signaling to our constituents when they see website updates, all this increased internet activity where we can connect with our people, and then the digital enhancement of the new CRM, it's really put us in good stead, and we're starting to hear the feedback already. There's some growing pains for some of them, because we're trying to tie in academic records from an old system to a new system. But the migration, under Invorg's guidance, seems to have gone very well. And once we get people in the door, any little grumblings about the change are going to disappear. And we see people already are seeing us in a different light, that we're able to keep up with the times, that we're able to push the envelope forward, and that we're able to meet them on their needs and more efficiently. If anyone has any questions that they think of in the future as they mull this over the next few days, feel free to reach out to me. There's my contact information there. If you're curious about our website and what we do, conservatorycanada.ca is where you can find us online. And I'm open to any questions. If anyone has any questions right now live for me, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to Invorg or myself if something occurs to you later and you want to chat further about the digital transformation, the process under Invorg. We've enjoyed incredibly, they've treated us incredibly fairly and have really uplifted us through this. And again, just want to thank Paul for inviting me on, and Joseph for to do this and present to you and give us a chance to recount our history and see what's, what meaningfully has been done for us. It's been a great process for me to do this over the past few weeks and sort of summarize and realize that we have taken some big steps. It's just a little one foot in front of the other along the way, but it sure adds up to a lot in the end and has made a really great difference to Conservatory Canada and how we do things. So I'll turn it back over to you.